The fog came in from the bay like something with intent, pressing against the windows of the Meridian Club until the glass wept with condensation. Inside the private dining room on the 32nd floor, 5 men sat around a table that cost more than most people's homes, and Yuki Ishida listened to them discuss her company as if she weren't there. The patent portfolio is the real asset, Marcus Chen was saying. He had the kind of voice that filled rooms without effort, smooth, confident, the voice of a man who had never been interrupted. Once we complete the acquisition, we'll need to restructure the IP licensing agreements. Yuki's team has been too conservative with monetization. Yuki's team, not her team, not even the team. Yuki's possessive, as if she were a child whose toys were being discussed by adults. She sat at the head of the table, technically. The seat her mother had occupied for 20 years, but Marcus had positioned himself at the corner where the two long sides met, and somehow that corner had become the center of gravity. Everyone angled toward him. Everyone except Yuki, who sat in her mother's chair and felt it growing larger around her with every passing minute. In 48 hours, Yuki Ishida would discover that everything she believed about her life was a lie. But at this moment, she was simply trying to survive a dinner where no one would look her in the eye. The valuation methodology is sound, Marcus continued. He slid a leather portfolio across the table, not to Yuki, but to David, who sat at her right hand. David, you'll want to review the indemnification clauses with Yuki before tomorrow's signing. David Morrison picked up the portfolio with the easy confidence of a man who had been handling other people's business for 30 years. He was 62, silver-haired, with the kind of weathered handsomeness that photographers loved. He had been Yuki's stepfather since she was 12 years old. "I'll walk her through it tonight," David said. He patted Yuki's arm without looking at her. "She's been anxious about the details. You know how she gets." The words landed like small stones in Yuki's chest. You know how she gets, as if anxiety were a personality flaw. As if her questions about a $2 billion acquisition were symptoms of a condition. She opened her mouth to respond, but Jonathan Park, young Korean-American, the junior partner who was supposed to be the progressive voice at the table, cut in before she could speak. "What Marcus means," Jonathan said, leaning forward with the earnest energy of someone explaining something simple to someone slow, "is that the valuation methodology accounts for market variables that aren't immediately obvious. It's complex, best to let the experts guide the process." Yuki's hand moved to her wrist, where a small carved figure hung from a silk cord. Her fingers found the familiar grooves, the crane's wings, the pearl clutched in its beak, the impossible delicacy of ivory that had survived 2 centuries, her mother's Netsuki. She had worn it every day since Keiko's death. David noticed the movement. "Still wearing your mother's thing, kiddo." His voice was gentle, fond, the voice of a man who had earned the right to use diminutives. "Keiko would want you focused on the future, not the past." The sommelier approached, a man in his 50s with the practiced invisibility of high-end service. He began to pour wine, moving around the table with silent efficiency. "The Chateau Margaux for the table," Marcus said. It was not a question. The sommelier filled David's glass, then Jonathan's, then Marcus's. When he reached Yuki's place, he paused, glancing at Marcus. "She'll have the same," David said. Yuki did not drink red wine. She had not drunk red wine since a medication interaction 3 years ago that David knew about, had discussed with her doctor, had supposedly noted in his careful management of her life. She said nothing. The meal arrived in courses that Yuki barely tasted. Seared scallops with yuzu foam, Wagyu beef with black truffle. Each dish placed before her by servers who moved like shadows, seen only when they wished to be seen. The men talked around her, through her, occasionally at her, questions that were really statements, requests for agreement that were really commands. "You're comfortable with the timeline?" Marcus asked, looking at David. "She's comfortable," David answered. "The board has approved the integration plan?" Marcus asked, looking at Jonathan. "The board trusts David's judgment," Jonathan answered. Yuki counted the minutes. She noted the way the fog pressed against the windows, the distant sound of foghorns from the bay, the soft clink of crystal against mahogany. She catalogued these details because focusing on them was easier than focusing on the sensation of disappearing. The contracts came out during dessert, chocolate soufflé that Yuki did not touch. Marcus spread the documents across the table with the ceremony of a priest preparing communion. "Standard terms," he said. "Your counsel has reviewed everything." Yuki's counsel was David, David who called her kiddo, David who ordered her wine, David who spoke for her so often that she sometimes forgot the sound of her own voice in these rooms. She reached for the documents. Her hand brushed the water glass at her place setting. The glass tipped. Water spread across the white tablecloth in a widening stain, soaking into the linen, bleeding toward the contracts. Sound it made was small, just the whisper of liquid meeting fabric, but in the silence that followed, it was deafening. Marcus sighed. Jonathan looked away. David's hand found her arm, steadying her, correcting her, as if she were a child who had spilled her milk. "It's fine, sweetheart," he murmured. "Accidents happen." The humiliation was physical. It sat in Yuki's stomach like a stone, pressed against her throat like a hand. She had 3 patents to her name. She had a PhD from MI. She had built the automation system that made Ishida Robotics' manufacturing process 40% more efficient than any competitors. And she had just spilled water on her own acquisition documents in front of men who already thought she was decorative at best. A server appeared at her elbow, a woman this time, Latina, middle-aged, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She moved with the same practiced invisibility as the others, already blotting the spill with a clean napkin, her face professionally blank. Yuki did not look at her. Servers were furniture in rooms like this. You did not make eye contact with furniture. But as the woman leaned close enough to reach the far edge of the stain, Yuki heard herself whisper under her breath. The words came out in Japanese, the language her mother had spoken to her in private moments, the language of comfort and despair. "Shikata ga nai. It cannot be helped." The server's hand stopped moving. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the woman leaned closer still, her lips nearly brushing Yuki's ear, and spoke in Japanese so formal it belonged in a Meiji-era court. "Ojo-sama, kono hito tachi wa anata no teki desu." "Honored lady, these men are your enemies." Yuki's breath caught. Her whole body went rigid. She turned her head slowly, and for the first time all evening she actually looked at another person in this room. The server's face was professionally composed, but her eyes told a different story. They held intelligence, sharp, assessing. They held pain, old pain, the kind that had calcined into something harder. And they held something else, something that took Yuki a moment to recognize because she had not seen it directed at her in so long. Recognition. This woman saw her, actually saw her, not the nervous heiress, not the grieving daughter, not the figurehead CEO who needed to be managed. Marcus cleared his throat. "Is there a problem with the service?" The server straightened, her expression smoothing back into professional blankness. "I was asking if Madam requires still or sparkling water." "Still," Yuki managed. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. The server moved away to fetch a fresh glass. But as she withdrew her hand from the table, Yuki felt something press against her palm beneath the tablecloth. Paper, folded, small enough to conceal in a closed fist. Yuki's fingers closed around it. The meal continued. Marcus discussed integration timelines. Jonathan made notes on his tablet. David reviewed the signing pages, marking places for initials with small adhesive flags. The server circled the table, refilling glasses, clearing plates, invisible again. But Yuki could still feel those eyes, could still hear those words, spoken in a language none of these men understood. "These men are your enemies." When the documents were finally assembled, 43 pages of legalese that would transfer everything her mother had built into Marcus Chen's waiting hands, David slid them across the table to her. "Just need your signature here, here, and here." He indicated the flagged pages. "And your initials on pages 12 through 15. Yuki looked at the documents. She thought of the water spreading across the tablecloth. She thought of the server's eyes. She thought of the paper burning in her palm. "I'd like to review the indemnification clause with outside counsel before signing." The silence that followed was different from the silence after the spill. That had been embarrassment, pity, the silence of people witnessing someone else's small failure. This was something else. This was the silence of a machine encountering an unexpected input. We discussed this. Marcus's voice remained smooth, but something shifted beneath it. Time is a factor, the market window, then I'll review it tonight. Yuki was surprised by how calm she sounded. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, but her voice was level. We can reconvene tomorrow. David's hand found her arm again, but this time she felt the pressure differently, not steadying, restraining. Kiddo, we've been over these documents. I've reviewed every clause. You don't need outside counsel to. I need to understand what I'm signing. Yuki met his eyes, really met them, for perhaps the first time in months. My mother would have wanted me to understand. Something flickered in David's expression, just for a moment. A tightening around the eyes, a slight flare of the nostrils. Then it was gone, replaced by the patient concern she had known her whole adult life. Of course, sweetheart, take all the time you need. Yuki stood. Her legs were unsteady, but she locked her knees and forced herself to remain upright. Gentlemen, thank you for dinner. She walked toward the door without waiting for responses. Behind her, she could hear David making apologies. She's been under a lot of stress. The anniversary of her mother's death is coming up. You know how emotional she gets, but she kept walking. Through the door, down the hallway, past the reception desk, where a young woman in black looked up with professional curiosity, into the elevator, down 32 floors. The lobby was marble and orchids, hushed and climate-controlled. Yuki crossed it without seeing it. Her hand was still closed around the paper. Outside, the fog had thickened. It moved through the streets like something alive, wrapping around lampposts and parked cars and the legs of late-night pedestrians. Yuki walked half a block before she realized she didn't know where she was going. This way. The voice came from the alley between the Meridian Club and the office building next door. Yuki turned. The server stood in the shadows, her apron gone, a dark coat replacing her uniform jacket. Without the professional costume, she looked different, older, sharper, more real. Her eyes were the same, though, that same unsettling intelligence. Who are you? Yuki's voice came out steadier than she expected. Someone who knows exactly what they're doing to you. The woman stepped forward and the streetlight caught her face. The exhaustion there, the determination. Because they did it to me first. What do you mean they did it to you? My name is Elena Vega. 3 years ago, I was one of the most respected patent attorneys in California. I specialized in protecting founders like your mother, immigrants, women, people who built something from nothing. Elena's voice was controlled, precise, but beneath the control, Yuki could hear the echo of old grief. Then I tried to expose the men at that table. I tried to expose what they were doing, the fraudulent patent challenges, the shell companies, the coordinated acquisition schemes, and they destroyed me. The fog pressed against them both. Somewhere in the distance, a foghorn sounded. Why should I believe you? Elena reached into her coat and produced a phone. She tapped the screen, then held it out to Yuki. The display showed a document, a wire transfer record, a payment of $40 million routed through an entity called Pacifica Holdings, dated 6 months in the future, payable to David Morrison, upon successful completion of the Ishida Robotics acquisition. Yuki's hand, the one that wasn't holding the note, began to tremble. That's not, he wouldn't, open the note. Yuki uncurled her fingers. The paper was soft from her grip, damp with sweat. She unfolded it with shaking hands. 3 words written in Japanese characters your mother knew. Keiko found the pattern, Elena said. 6 months before she died, she started asking questions. She hired a forensic accountant to investigate. She tried to contact me. Elena's voice caught just slightly. I never received her message. Someone intercepted it. Someone she trusted. The fog swirled around them. The foghorn sounded again, closer now. The note, Yuki whispered. You wrote this. I wrote it tonight, but the truth in it, your mother discovered that truth 2 years ago. Elena stepped closer, and then she died, suddenly, without warning, before she could tell anyone what she'd found. Yuki thought of her mother's face in the hospital, the monitors, the doctors with their careful voices explaining that these things happened, that aneurysms were unpredictable, that there was nothing anyone could have done. She thought of David at the funeral, his arm around her shoulders, his voice in her ear. "I'll take care of everything, kiddo. Your mother would have wanted me to take care of you." "The signing is tomorrow night," Elena said. "Same room, same people. If those documents get your signature, everything your mother built becomes their property. They will strip the patents, dissolve the company, and no one will ever know what they did." "What am I supposed to do?" Elena's eyes held hers. In them, Yuki saw something she hadn't seen from anyone in years: faith. Not in what Yuki had proven, not in her credentials or her inheritance. Faith in what she might be capable of. "Come with me, let me show you what I know, and then we decide together what happens next." Behind them, the door to the Meridian Club opened. Light spilled into the fog. Voices, David's voice calling her name. "Yuki, sweetheart, are you out here?" Elena melted back into the shadows of the alley. Yuki stood in the fog, her mother's Netsuki pressing against her wrist, Elena's note pressing against her palm, and 2 years of obedience pressing against her throat. David's footsteps approached. In a moment, he would find her. In a moment, she would have to choose. She thought of her mother's voice. "The crane carries the pearl through any storm." She turned away from the light and followed Elena Vega into the dark. They drove east across the Bay Bridge in Elena's 12-year-old Honda, the city lights dissolving into darkness behind them. Yuki sat in the passenger seat with her hands pressed flat against her thighs, trying to stop them from shaking. "You speak Japanese," she said. "Formal Japanese. Where did you learn?" 20 years of protecting immigrant founders." Elena's eyes stayed fixed on the road. "Korean, Japanese, Mandarin, enough to read patents, review contracts, make clients feel safe. Languages were the easy part. The hard part was watching everything I learned get used against me." The car smelled of coffee and something floral, jasmine maybe, an air freshener shaped like a tree hung from the rearview mirror, spinning slowly in the heater's draft. "Tell me," Yuki said. "Everything," Elena exhaled. When she spoke, her voice was controlled, precise, the voice of someone who had rehearsed this testimony in her mind for years. "I was a patent attorney. I specialized in protecting founders who didn't have the resources to fight the big firms. Immigrants, women, first-generation entrepreneurs who built something from nothing and needed someone to help them keep it." She changed lanes, passing a truck whose headlights briefly flooded the car with white light. 8 years ago, I started noticing a pattern. Companies that Catalyst Ventures wanted to acquire kept having their core patents challenged just before the deal closed. Prior art claims filed through shell companies, claims that were technically plausible but ultimately fraudulent. The challenges would tank the company's valuation, the founders would panic, and Catalyst would swoop in with a lowball offer. And the founders took it. They had no choice. Once your patent is under challenge, your company is worthless on paper. You can fight it in court for years, or you can take the cash and walk away. Elena's jaw tightened. Most of them walked. The ones who fought lost everything. They exited the freeway into an industrial district, warehouses, self-storage facilities, the kind of anonymous buildings that existed in every city and no one ever really saw. "I built a case," Elena continued. 3 years of documentation, shell company registrations, wire transfers, testimony from founders who'd been victimized. I was 6 days away from going to the state bar when 2 junior attorneys from my own firm testified that I had fabricated evidence. Had you? Elena pulled into a parking lot outside a storage facility. She turned off the engine. In the sudden silence, Yuki could hear the tick of cooling metal, the distant hum of the freeway. "No," Elena's voice was flat, hard. "But it didn't matter. They had emails I never sent. Documents with my signatures I never made." The bar moved fast. 11 weeks from accusation to disbarment. I lost my license, my reputation, my ability to practice law anywhere in the country. She opened her door. Cold air rushed into the car, carrying the smell of concrete and exhaust. One of the attorneys who testified against me was named Jonathan Park. Yuki felt something click into place, the young Korean-American partner at the table, the one who had lectured her about complexity. He was at dinner tonight. "I know." Elena stepped out of the car. "Come on, I need to show you something." The storage unit was 10 feet by 10 feet, lit by a single fluorescent tube that buzzed and flickered like something dying. Metal walls reflected the harsh light. Dust motes drifted in the stale air. 3 hard drives sat on a metal shelf, their black casings unmarked. I kept everything, Elena said. Encrypted, backed up in 3 locations. I told myself it was because I couldn't let go, but maybe I always knew someone would need them. She plugged one of the drives into a battered laptop and turned the screen toward Yuki. Files cascaded across the display, PDFs, spreadsheets, scanned documents. Shell company registrations, Elena said, pointing. Wire transfers, patent challenge filings, all of it traces back to the same network of entities. Yuki leaned closer. The fluorescent light hummed above her, cold and indifferent. She scrolled through the files, her eyes catching on familiar names. Pacifica Holdings, she murmured. I've seen this name before. Where? In my own company's financial records. I had a forensic accountant review our books 3 months ago. She found a series of payments to Pacifica Holdings, payments that weren't in any budget I'd approved. Yuki's throat tightened. When I asked her to dig deeper, she said she needed more time. Then she stopped returning my calls. Elena went very still. What was her name? Grace Chen. The name hung in the air between them. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, just a moment, and when she opened them again, something had shifted in her expression. We need to see my mother. Rosa Vega lived in a small apartment in Oakland, 3 rooms filled with plants and photographs, and the smell of coffee that had been brewing for hours. She was 70 years old, with silver hair pulled back in a bun and hands that moved constantly, adjusting picture frames, straightening doilies, touching her daughter's arm as if to confirm she was real. Mija, Rosa's voice was heavy with worry. What have you done? What I should have done 3 years ago. Elena guided Yuki to a small kitchen table covered with a plastic cloth printed with sunflowers. Mama, show her the notebook. Rosa hesitated. Then she crossed to a drawer beside the refrigerator and produced a composition book, the kind schoolchildren use, black and white marbled cover, pages soft with handling. I've been watching, Rosa said. She set the notebook on the table with the care of someone handling something precious. Since they took everything from my daughter, I clip newspapers, I write down names, I don't understand everything, but I know patterns. She opened the notebook. Yuki saw columns of handwritten text, newspaper clippings taped to pages, dates circled in red ink. Here, Rosa pointed to an entry near the middle. 6 months ago, a patent hearing in San Jose. An expert witness testified on behalf of a company called Meridian Dynamics, a catalyst portfolio company. Yuki read the name Rosa had written in careful block letters. Grace Chen. The coffee maker gurgled in the corner. Somewhere outside, a car alarm began to wail, then stopped. She didn't disappear, Yuki said. The words came out hollow, stripped of emotion. She was theirs from the beginning. Elena nodded. Everything you tried to investigate, every question you asked, it was all reported back to Marcus. They knew exactly what you were looking for. They knew exactly how to stay ahead of you. Yuki thought of Grace Chen's reassuring smile, her patient explanations, her promises that she would find the truth. 3 months of trust. 3 months of thinking she had an ally. She had been alone the entire time. Rosa pressed a cup of coffee into Yuki's hands, strong, sweet, the warmth seeping through the ceramic into her cold fingers. The kitchen was small but clean, filled with the accumulated textures of a life, crocheted pot holders, a calendar from a Mexican grocery store, photographs of Elena at various ages. Elena sat across from her, watching. That piece you wear, Elena said, the one at your wrist. It's Edo period, isn't it? Museum quality. Why do you wear it every day? Yuki's fingers found the netsuki without conscious thought, the crane's wings, the pearl in its beak, the grooves worn smooth by generations of handling. My mother gave it to me when I graduated from MIT. The memory surfaced with unexpected force, Keiko's face, her careful hands, the weight of the small carved figure as it settled into Yuki's palm. She said the crane carries the pearl through any storm. You are my pearl, she told me. Carry yourself with the same care. Elena's expression softened. Your mother sounds like she understood value that others couldn't see. She understood a lot of things. Yuki's voice caught. I'm only now realizing how much. Her phone buzzed against her thigh. She pulled it out. David's name glowed on the screen. Worried about you, kiddo. Marcus rescheduled signing for tomorrow evening. Let's talk before then. Love you. Elena leaned forward. Don't respond yet. There's something else you need to see. She pulled the laptop from her bag and opened another file. Wire transfer records, shell company registrations, documents dense with legal language. These are the original files I compiled, the evidence that got me disbarred. Elena scrolled through the records, her finger tracing lines of text. Shell company registrations for Pacifica Holdings. Look at the signatory. Yuki looked. The name was printed clearly on 3 separate documents, dated across a span of 4 years. David Morrison. The coffee turned to acid in Yuki's stomach. That's not possible. David was my mother's partner. He's been protecting me since she died. Has he been protecting you? Elena's voice was gentle but relentless. Or has he been positioning you? Yuki thought of every decision David had guided her toward, every board meeting where he spoke on her behalf, every reassurance that she wasn't ready to handle things alone, every kiddo and sweetheart that had made her feel small. Show me more. Elena pulled up another document, a contract, consulting fees payable to David Morrison upon successful completion of the Ishida Robotics acquisition, $40 million. Rosa crossed herself silently. He's not protecting you, Elena said. He's delivering you. He's been delivering your company to Marcus Chen in exchange for a payout larger than most people will see in 10 lifetimes. Yuki's hands had stopped shaking. Something else was happening now, a cold settling in her chest, a hardening. The grief and confusion were crystallizing into something sharper. My mother, she said. Did she know? Elena hesitated. Then she opened one more file. This was in my original evidence. I didn't understand its significance until tonight. An email draft filled the screen, dated 2 years ago, 6 months before Keiko Ishida's death. The sender was Keiko's personal address. The recipient was an address Elena no longer used. Elena, I've found what you were looking for. The pattern is real. Pacifica Holdings connects to the message ended there. Unsent, interrupted. I never received this, Elena said quietly. Someone stopped it before she could finish. Someone with access to her email. Yuki stared at the truncated words. Her mother's words. Her mother, who had been fighting the same battle Yuki hadn't even known existed. She died a week after writing this. Yuki's voice was steady now, cold. An aneurysm, they said it was sudden, unpredictable, nothing anyone could have done. Rosa's hand found Yuki's arm. The old woman's grip was surprisingly strong. The implication filled the room like smoke, unspoken, undeniable. They killed my mother. We don't know that, Elena said. We know they intercepted her warning. We know they benefit from her death. We know they're doing the same thing to me. Yuki stood. The chair scraped against the floor. You said you lost everything trying to expose them. What if this time you had someone inside the room? Elena looked up at her. What are you thinking? The signing dinner is tomorrow night. Same room, same people. They expect the quiet daughter who does what she's told. Yuki's hand closed around the Netsuki, the crane, the pearl, her mother's last gift. Let's give them exactly what they expect. Her eyes met Elena's. And this time, we'll be recording everything. The Meridian Club smelled exactly the same, leather and cedar, expensive wine, the faint salt of fog pressing against the windows. The Bay Bridge glittered through the glass, its lights suspended in the darkness like a promise that could be broken. Yuki entered with David at her side. She wore the Netsuki prominently at her wrist, the crane's carved wings catching the light. Feeling better today, kiddo? David's hand found her elbow, guiding her toward the table. The same table. The same chairs. Much clearer, thank you. Marcus and Jonathan were already seated, legal documents arranged before them like weapons. Crystal water glasses caught the chandelier's glow, and moving between the chairs, refilling those glasses with steady hands, was Elena, different uniform, same professional invisibility. No one looked at her. She was furniture again, but this time Yuki knew she was there. And beneath the silk of Yuki's blouse, pressed flat against her skin, was a recording device no larger than a credit card. She took her seat, the leather trapped warmth against her back, but this time the sensation felt different, not confining, grounding. "Shall we proceed?" Marcus slid the documents toward her. "Your counsel has reviewed everything." "Actually," Yuki folded her hands on the table, "I had some questions I was hoping you could clarify first." David's smile flickered, so briefly that anyone else would have missed it. "Kiddo, we've been through the terms. You don't need to worry about the details." "I think I do." Yuki kept her voice light, curious, the voice of a woman still learning. "The patent valuation, for instance. I'm confused about how the independent assessment determined our IP was worth so much less than our internal projections." Marcus leaned back in his chair, pleased to lecture. "Patent valuation is complex. The prior art reviews identified potential challenges to several of your core technologies, challenges that would significantly reduce their market value." "Prior art reviews," Yuki nodded slowly. "Conducted by which firm?" "Independent specialists, very thorough." "And these specialists, do they have any relationship with Catalyst's other portfolio companies?" A pause. Marcus's smile remained fixed, but something shifted behind his eyes. "I'm not sure what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm asking questions." Yuki glanced at the documents. "For example, these consulting fees payable upon deal closure, $40 million to," she traced a line with her finger, "various facilitation entities. Who exactly are we paying?" David reached for his wine glass. His hand trembled just slightly. "Standard costs," Marcus said smoothly. "Your board has approved them." "My board," Yuki looked at David. "Which includes you." "Sweetheart, I've been reviewing some historical transactions." Yuki's voice hardened by degrees, shedding its careful naivety. "Wire transfers to an entity called Pacifica Holdings, the same entity that appears in patent challenge filings going back 15 years. Elena moved around the table, refilling glasses. She reached Jonathan's place, poured. Their eyes met. Jonathan's face went white. The recognition took 3 seconds to surface, 3 seconds during which every muscle in his body seemed to lock. He knew her. He knew exactly who was standing 3 feet away, holding a water pitcher with steady hands. Elena didn't flinch. She finished pouring and moved on. Jonathan stood abruptly. Excuse me, I need a moment." He left the table. Through the doorway, Yuki could see him in the hallway, phone in hand, not dialing, just standing there, breathing. "Yuki." Marcus's voice had lost its warmth. "I don't know what you think you've found, but this conversation is becoming unproductive. My mother flagged the same transactions." Yuki stood. Her hand found the Netsuki at her wrist, the crane, the pearl, her mother's voice whispering across 2 years of silence. "Before she died, she tried to contact someone about them, a patent attorney named Elena Vega." David made a sound, half word, half breath. "The message was intercepted by someone with access to her email." Yuki looked directly at him. "Someone she trusted." David's mask cracked, not completely, but enough. "Yuki, sweetheart, you're upset. You don't understand. I understand that my mother died a week after writing that message." Yuki's voice was steady now, cold as the fog outside. "I understand that you've spent 3 years positioning me to sign away everything she built. I understand exactly what you are." Marcus stood. "This conversation is over." "I agree." Yuki reached into her blouse and produced the recording device. She set it on the mahogany table with a soft click. "This conversation has been documented, as has every admission you've made tonight about shell companies, fraudulent patent reviews, and financial arrangements between Catalyst Ventures and certain board members." Silence. The kind of silence that has weight. Marcus's face cycled through emotions. Calculation, disbelief, the first cold edge of fear. Elena stepped forward. She removed her apron, folded it once, and set it on the table beside the recorder. "Marcus." Her voice was calm, precise, the voice of the attorney she had once been. "It's been 6 years." Marcus stared at her. Recognition came slowly, then all at once. "You're supposed to be destroyed," Elena almost smiled. "I was, but I kept the evidence, all of it. And now I have a witness withstanding, a CEO who can take this to federal prosecutors." She looked toward the doorway, where Jonathan had reappeared. His face was gray. His hands hung at his sides. "I suspect at least one of your partners might prefer state's evidence to prosecution." Jonathan didn't answer. But he didn't leave. 6 months later, San Francisco wore a different face, sunlight instead of fog, warmth instead of cold. A hotel ballroom filled with attorneys, law students, and legal ethics advocates gathered for the California State Bar's annual conference. Elena Vega stood at the podium, her first public speech since reinstatement. Her voice carried across the room, clear and certain, reaching the front row where Yuki Ishida sat with her hands folded in her lap. "The founders I tried to protect," Elena was saying, "were never invisible. We simply chose not to see them. Their value was always there, in their innovations, their resilience, their refusal to disappear. The failure was ours." A young server approached the podium to refill Elena's water glass. Her hand trembled, nerves perhaps, or the weight of the room's attention. The glass tipped. Water spread across Elena's notes, darkening the paper. The room fell silent. The server froze, horror flooding her face. For a moment, she was every person who had ever made a mistake in front of people who mattered, exposed, diminished, waiting to be dismissed. Elena smiled. She reached out and took the young woman's hand, not the glass. "Not the notes, the hand. It's just water." Her voice was gentle. "Are you all right?" The server nodded, relief breaking across her features like dawn. Elena turned to the room. "I used to work in service. I know what it feels like to be invisible in a room full of important people." She squeezed the server's hand once, then released it. "You're not invisible to me." In the front row, Yuki's fingers found the netsuke at her wrist. The crane, the pearl, her mother's last gift. And on Elena's wrist, Yuki could see it from here, another netsuke. A gift she had given Elena the day the reinstatement was finalized. A woman holding scales, carved from the same ivory, by the same hand, a century ago. Their eyes met across the room. Elena returned to her speech. "The women and men we will discuss today, the immigrant founders, the first-generation entrepreneurs, the people who built something from nothing and had it taken away, they were never invisible. We simply chose not to see them." She paused. The room was silent, listening. "Today we learn to see." Applause rose, warm, sustained, genuine. Sunlight poured through the windows, and two women looked at each other across a crowded room, seen at last. Marcus Chen was arrested 3 weeks after that dinner on federal fraud and racketeering charges. He awaits trial. David Morrison was arrested as co-conspirator. The investigation into Keiko Ishida's death remains ongoing. Jonathan Park turned state's evidence. His testimony corroborated Elena's files and detailed 15 years of fraudulent acquisitions. Elena Vega was reinstated to the California State Bar. She now serves as general counsel for Ishida Robotics. Yuki Ishida addressed her board, not as a figurehead, but as CEO. The acquisition was cancelled. The company remains independent. The netsuke, Elena wears hers every day now. A crane carries a pearl through any storm. A woman holds the scales of justice. 2 invisible women, finally seen. The investigation into Keiko's death continues. Some questions take longer to answer than others. Some truths, once buried, take time to surface. But they surface. They always surface.